What's up, everybody? Today is going to be a little bit of a unique episode. Today is July 5th, so I hope everyone gets to get out, go ride, and almost over the holiday weekend. Um, but this week we had something really interesting. We had the new X3 get released. And one thing about the new X3 is the Smart-Shox system. I personally wasn't the biggest fan of the Smart-Shox system and the DYNAMIX. Now, I will say that I personally have never been in a car speed with the DYNAMIX system or a Smart-Shox system because those just came out. But I have ridden with guys who had the DYNAMIX system, and I saw how they used it in the terrains that we drive in. So I was going to talk a little bit today about the Smart-Shox, the DYNAMIX system, break those down, how they're usable in different terrains, because a lot of times these cars, a lot of the promos you see from Can-Am especially and Polaris is they're always out in the desert trying to use their Smart-Shox system to be better at taking whoops or be better at going fast in the desert. So I kind of wanted to clear the air because a lot of guys in the East Coast have the feeling that this was kind of a flop release from Can-Am. I know a lot of guys were expecting better visibility, possibly more horsepower. Don't know why Can-Am would ever need more horsepower, but they were kind of expecting something else. But when Can-Am dropped that teaser video, I think it was very clear that they were trying to emphasize some stylistic changes with colors and things like that. But on top of that, they were also highlighting the button switch, so it was very evident that it was going to be a smart system come out from Can-Am. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of my tabs going here and make sure everybody can see this. Okay. So what I did was on the Can-Am website, and I just looked up the new Smart-Shox because essentially that's the difference between the 2020 car and the 2021. Something that's really interesting is that companies can market themselves as industry leaders or the first person to do it or groundbreaking technology just because they want to. I know that the first thing that you see here on the Can-Am website is moving the goalpost in the industry semi-active suspension technology responding with compression and rebound. I'm not 100% sure if the system handles compression and rebound. Possibly that they're the industry first here. But I can tell that from my understanding, they're pretty close to the same. I went through and I watched all of the Can-Am stuff. I watched all the DYNAMIX stuff. There's not a lot of information out about the Can-Am. Can-Am hasn't done their kind of like release party yet where they invite people to come and have the breakdown with the engineers and talk to people like that. So I'm expecting that we'll see those, salesperson to Mad Ram and the guys who kind of leak information out slowly but surely. I would assume that we would see that from Can-Am weeks to get a bit more information about what makes the Smart-Shox system so much better than the DYNAMIX, for example. Now, obviously, we got new paint colors, things like that. They're great. It didn't really didn't. I'm not a crazy huge fan. It didn't blow me away with the new Can-Am colors. I personally really like the black orange ones. If you follow us on Facebook and Instagram, I actually posted it is a regular, looks like a 1000 or maybe a turbo, an XP model. And someone had done the color scheme of the Can-Am X3 RR that's black and orange, and it looks awesome. It's probably one of the best looking color schemes that has ever been done on a side-by-side. But jump over to the Polaris site here in a few minutes and we'll talk about, in my opinion, the best color schemes that's been done. So I kind of just wanted to sift through this. It says, the big focus on the Smart-Shox system is essentially the fact that it's smart. They're using phrases, like all brain, all brawn, all day. They talk about people running, nothing unexpected. The system is doing 100 calculations a second to determine whether or not what to do and rock solid ability. Now, one thing that I found very interesting as I was digging up information about this was Can-Am really, and Polaris market it this way as well. The systems are designed to correct what the driver is doing. So if you oversteer, if you slide into a corner too much, and if you've ever tried to do a donut, or if you've tried to really take hard, there's always that potential that you can go up and kind of ride the side a second. And these suspension systems are supposed to be so smart that they prevent the actual body roll in the car, or they allow body roll on one corner where they lock down the other three corners. Um, I'm interested. I would like to get in one of these cars, but we'll see what happens in the future here. One thing that's worth mentioning at this point is I have a scheduled date with Polaris in the works, and with a couple weeks or so. Actually been talking to Can-Am as well. I'm hopeful that Can-Am and I can get a date scheduled here in the next couple weeks. So we'll have a chance to hear from both factory drivers, or I'm sorry, not factory drivers, but spokespeople from the factory industry level. I think it'll be very interesting to hear what both of them have to say. I put a post out asking what people would want to ask Polaris represent. They had someone, a lot of really cool stuff. If you guys have anything that you specifically would want to know from Polaris, I'm going to have them online. I'm going to have them on the horn. And that one's for sure right now. So I will also say the same thing for Can-Am. I've reached out. Everything's going good. Scheduling takes a while, especially with the bigger companies. I would assume that people have to double check that, what can I say? What can I do? Can I go on here? And what do you want me to say when I'm on here? So there's a little bit of back and forth and scheduling and things like that. So I would assume that I'm going to get Can-Am as well, just as well as the process is going. So if you have anything that you'd like to have answered from either one of those companies, a message, let me know. I've also planned on reaching out to the Nikola company of UTVs. I know Heavy D from the Diesel Brothers. They've been their new truck that Nikola just came out with. It's an all electric, kind of the twin sister of Tesla. So interesting stuff there. They've got a UTV. It's some crazy amount of money. It's like $80,000 for their top of the line one, but we can go into that in a second because it is pretty cool. I've thought about reaching out to those guys and also reaching out to Kawasaki because I'll talk about Kawasaki in a little bit too. So obviously, it's kind of the same thing as the DYNAMIX system. It's got a comfort mode. Let's see, plus priority on controlling the vehicle's body for flatter cornering, allowing the suspension to move as freely as possible. Got a sport mode. This mode puts an emphasis on straight line handling and comfort while minimizing corner roll and body movement. It says the perfect setting for most driving situations, terrains, and riding styles. Personally, I would probably run it in comfort in the Southeast all the time. I did go out with David Uptain from Razor Life and Ricky B from RCV this weekend. I got to see Storm and Norman, and if y'all haven't seen that, let me see if I can get a picture of that thing pulled up here. Storm and Norman Razor. It was pretty amazing. It's really it's really an amazing machine. I believe it's on 4-inch portals. Here's just the best. Well, I'll find one shortly. But it's on 4-inch portals, 37-inch tall tires, and it's absolute beast. But more than anything, it's I don't know. It's a really good indication of the different platforms that you can do. And David actually spent most of the ride in comfort, going through some really heavy, really tall rock crawling. But one thing I noticed is he put it into firm mode to get over a big ledge where he was, hitting. He was basically, here's the ledge. He was getting hung on his belly like that right there. And I watched him flip it to comfort, and he came back. Nothing had adjusted. But when he hit it again and the suspension compressed down, when it unloaded the suspension again, it unloaded it about 4 or 5 inches further. So he had essentially raised the actual height on the car substantially. I don't have an exact measurement, but it was enough to go from not being able to get over the obstacle to getting over the obstacle fairly easy. So there is a big difference. A lot of people have asked me, is there a difference between comfort? Does it actually make a difference? Because most of us are used to the stupid clickers on all of our shocks, and they don't really do much. I even talked to Hubert Rowland, who has been sponsored by both Polaris and Can-Am, and he basically told me that it's for chattery stuff at best. So those small rocks, he said it's not much of an adjustment. It's not even really worth messing with. Which all in all, that's probably true. I took all the way soft, and then ran some whoops at his house on one of his courses he has, and then all the way hard. And I could tell a little bit of a difference, but definitely not a lot. So, one thing to note is if you do get the dynamic suspension, there is a very big change between comfort and sport. Now you have Sport Plus mode. That's the highest performance suspension setting ever. It prioritizes full shock stiffness for sharpest handling and most aggressive bumps and whoops control, a true race inspired feel. I will say this: if you've never been in a race car, they're brutally stiff, and they do that because you kind of just want to like hop across the stuff. You don't have to actually drop down into the rocks. You don't want to have to drop down and feel every single crevice and drop and rock and things like that. If you can kind of skirt across the top, that's where you're really going to have your best success. So that's why, let's see if I can get myself back here. That Sport Plus mode is going to be the most firm setting, and they use that for the race setting because it's just going to lock you out, and it's going to prevent you from having any situation where if you bottom completely out, you're not going to do that, because if you hit something at speed, obviously you're going to have more impact to the suspension. So it's stiffer means faster. There's a lot of guys, and David is a good example of this. He had his car sprung by Shock Therapy, and they sprung it for, I think he said King of Hammers style. And he said for the riding out East Coast, it was just far too stiff. So he's planning on respringing it. He said he thinks the valves are good, but springs are just the next thing is kind of pretty much it, to be honest with you. One thing I did bring up is price of this car. It's pretty big. One of the main things that I'm going to be talking to Polaris and Can-Am about is at what point get too expensive. So here we have a Maverick X3 XRS Turbo R package shown starting at $18,999. I don't know what comes with this car. In fact, we'll go through it because I would like to know. So let's see here if we got all these. Okay. Maverick DS 64-inch width, and that's pretty much, it's 120 horsepower. So you go to the Maverick DS Turbo R. So the R is what's going to make it the higher horsepower, and the RR is the even higher horsepower. So there's your differentiating factor. And then you have the Maverick X3 RS, and the RS is just going to be the 72-inch, and the DS is the 64-inch. And then there's these different options here. So here's the thing, though, is, going from the DS Turbo R, which is just, it has a turbo, the 102 horsepower, and then jumping up to the Turbo RR, where you gain another 23 horsepower. It's been a long day. You gain substantial horsepower there, and the Smart Lock feature, which is in its own worth all the money. But there's a $5,000 increase, about $4,000 increase right there. That's a substantial increase, and especially when that base model turbo starts at the base model 72-inch turbo is 22, and the base model 64-inch is 19. So, or excuse me, it would be 19 and 23 if I'm going to round up. But you get into the top of the line, the RS Turbo RR 2-inch top of the line car is $27,599. So you're at 28 grand to get the turbo version, that what used to be the best car. Now with the Smart-Shox, starts at 29,299, so 30 to get the turbo RR with the Smart-Shox system. Now there is different options you can do here. Let's see here. I want to make sure I'm all in the right place here. Yeah, it's just, it starts at 30 grand, which is a pretty hefty price to pay. So What I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to close this window out. Uh, we're going to jump over to Polaris. We're going to talk about Polaris for a second because um, it's very similar. It's a very similar story. If you see here, we have the DYNAMIX, the same amount of uh, reevaluations or adjustments on the valving every 200 times every second. So same thing as Can-Am. Polaris talks a lot about usable wheel travel, and it's, I don't know all those really or what all those mean, but again, you have a comfort, you have a sport, and you have a firm, the same setup. Um, to me, sport, firm, all that stuff kind of just means the same thing. But one thing I did notice again is the real use for this in the East Coast terrains where we don't really get the chance to open up and go wide open is ground clearance. A lot of guys will ride on comfort, and it's definitely, I mean, it is awesome. It's like riding on a cloud. I've been in the car when it's on comfort and it feels great. But if you're really getting hung up on like a ledge or a rock section or something like that, flipping it over to firm really makes a huge difference. I mean, multiple inches of travel is gained by switching over to firm. It's to me, that's the only use for the DYNAMIX system East Coast. I would personally, and I'm going to say this to both Can-Am and Razor when we get on the line, you've got to start marketing to the East Coast better. Because if you look, every single one of these pictures, we got, West Coast, middle of the country, West Coast, you got desert here, you got more desert. None of these are ever East Coast, cruising through a creek. They're never East Coast trails. They're never hill killing. They're never, doing the things that we do on this side of the country. And it's not just the Southeast, it's the Northeast. It's a lot of trail riding everywhere. These cars are built for high-speed desert sections. Now, you're sitting yourself and going, well, what about the Rock and Trail Edition? So let's pull that up because I always I like talking about this one because I think they had an awesome idea, and I think that they just kind of goofed just slightly. So they offer a Razor XP 1000 Trail and Rocks edition. It comes fully decked out in this awesome beige color. It comes factory with Pro Armor tires and bead locks. The specs of this, though, that make this really, really neat here is all of this information down here. Now, that information down there is Trail and Rock features a 55% lower low gear, low speed throttle mapping, which can be changed with a programmer from like Dynajet research. They can get you a programmer to change that throttle mapping. So that's not that big of a deal. $300-400, you're good. Whoops, closed out the wrong window here. So that's not the biggest thing in the world. A lot of the technology side of this is not the biggest thing in the world. But things that can't be, there's an extreme performance all-wheel drive. If I remember correctly, the Highlifter for a few years had a front diff that was geared slightly different than the rear end. So the front end would actually spin faster than the rear end. I believe, and if I'm incorrect, don't hold me to it. I'm not 100%, so I'm being ignorant here. I'm pretty sure that the Rock and Trail has the same thing, and perhaps that's the extreme performance all-wheel drive, where that front end actually pulls. It spins a couple more times. It spins just slightly faster than the rear end. Front is technically always pulling you just as much, or if not a little bit more, than the back end is pushing you. One thing that's really cool is if you ever have like an RC car, pull the front drive shaft or pull the rear drive shaft and leave the other one in, and you'll see just how useless the car is when you don't have true four-wheel drive. And it's pretty funny because a lot of the times getting over an obstacle or trying to determine how to get over an obstacle is at what point does my rig go from having the rear tires pushing the car up the obstacle to when is one of the front tires pulling the car over the obstacle. It's something to think about if you're new to driving and things like that. It's a really good mindset to have because once you increase the incline, once you do those things, the car is doing something different. So it's good to keep that in mind because it'll also keep your parts together. If your front's pulling, don't beat on it too bad because that front end's a lot weaker than the rear end. But anyways, the Trails and Rock Edition, they missed it just a little bit because this low gear is just slightly too low. I've been in one, and it's like you really got to stay in the gas to keep the momentum going. As soon as you let off the gas and low, it's like if you're going downhill and you're riding your engine brake, and then you come to a flat area and it kind of like really kicks you forward as you're coming in, it kind of slows you down a whole lot more. It's like that in low, especially if you're not keeping your foot in the throttle. You'll really have like one of these situations where you're just going back and forth all day long. So I don't know. I think it's a great car. I think it's cool. I wish they would do more with this. Probably the first question I'm going to ask Polaris when I get them on the line is why and use the 1000 XP transmission? Why keep reverse chains there? Why not build out of the fact the 1000 motor with a turbo transmission and turbo clutches and drive shafts? Why would you not do the Razor XP 1000S and have all of the benefit of the turbo stuff just without the turbo? I mean, what that does is it essentially builds the perfect car. You don't have you have a little bit less power than the turbo. I know personally, just in my riding style, I don't ever reach. I had a turbo, had multiple turbos, in fact, and I just never really got to that point where the turbo made the difference between one or the other. But I would always choose to buy a turbo just for the beefed up drivetrain components. And I got an XP 1000 thinking to myself, it'd probably be good enough. I run a 1000 in my rock bouncer for a while, ended up breaking the prop shaft and all kinds of other stuff. So maybe I just got a good deal on a 1000, and it's kind of biting me in the ass now because I definitely should have waited and got a turbo and not have the headaches of possible transmission work that I have to do now because they're junk. The 1000 transmissions are junk, and you're going to break them. But that's not the point of this episode. This episode was talk about the DYNAMIX system and all that fun stuff. So again, I went through, looked at all the DYNAMIX stuff. It looks like Can-Am is marketing it slightly different in terms of they're calling it. I don't remember. The page is loading while we're sitting here. They're calling it something different where Polaris has all three options. They have the smart system that reevaluates 200 times every second. But one thing that Polaris has that Can-Am does not is the handy dandy. It's the button. I would like to find a picture of the button. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I'll be able to find it here while I'm talking. But the button makes a really big difference. And one really cool thing is, let's see if I can find you a picture. One really great thing is the ride command in the DYNAMIX vehicles. It actually shows everything on screen for you in terms of what the screen is actually doing here. Here you go. Here's a great example. Make sure that I'm still sharing the screen. Let's see here if I can change this screen around here and get you guys the right one. The really cool thing about this DYNAMIX driving airborne. Okay, all right. There we go. Okay, so on the actual ride command, it shows you what's going on with the shocks, shows you the amount of brake and all those other really cool things. So in the example here, the picture, it's actually showing that the car is airborne, and what it's doing is it has completely locked all the shocks back out. And you know that when you land, you're going to land on the firmest setting of all the shocks. I actually really like this. I think that this is cool. As a technology guy, I would be playing with this kind of thing and going through different terrains and watching what my shocks are doing. And I don't know, just it's interesting. More information may help you learn something down the road, or may help you learn how to drive the car a little different. So I'm a big fan of that system right there. But back to the Polaris website here. One thing that I think is really come on, Polaris, where you at? One thing that I think is really worth mentioning is the stop button here. And I'm trying to find you a good picture of it. But essentially, if you find yourself in a situation where you're coming up and there's an unexpected whoop or something like that, you can essentially lock out the suspension to completely firm. Here it is. you can lock it out to completely firm all in one get with that red button right there. And essentially, again, you are racing or you're trail riding, you're going fast, and 1 second you're fine, and the next second you got a big washout or a big drop or something unexpected. You press that button, and the entire suspension goes full stiff for 1 second. It's basically like it's like an oh shit button, you know. I know a lot of times you just kind of hit it and you take it on the chin, and it kind of is what it is, but I don't know. You know, it's one of those things. I think it's a cool thing. It's a nice little addition. But one thing that Polaris really seems to have it right with is the Turbo S. Well, before we talk about Turbo S, I got a lot of hate for liking this color scheme right here. I think it's awesome. I think that color scheme is cool. I'm not a crazy big fan of that yellow roll cage. I think it's kind of like mustard yellow and doesn't exactly match. So, you know, kind of is what it is. But I really like it. It looks like a Dorito car. Dorito needs to partner with Polaris and start sticking little, you know, spicy nacho signs all over the doors and stuff. I think it'd be funny. However, the Turbo S. The Turbo S is quite possibly where Polaris nailed it. And I really think that this is going to be the year where we see the Pro XPS or Pro XPR, whatever you want to call it. And you'll get a good chance to have the Pro XP that everyone thought should have come out last year. I've ridden in the Pro XP. I think it's a great car. It's very comfortable. And again, seeing one this weekend, very comfortable. I think that they made some interesting choices on doors and like the side shark fin that's kind of on the back behind the B pillar doors, or the C pillar in that case, if it's a four-seater. It's cool. It's a cool car. The inside is awesome. But I think once you push that car to 72 inches and you get the performance of the Turbo S, I really think that some of the momentum that Can-Am has will swing back to Razor. Now, everyone is kind of going through this right now. I just got off the phone yesterday with Super Grip ATV, and I was talking to them, and they're just so sold out of tires and so sold out of everything that they've got because of the coronavirus and causing all the delays in product. Essentially, no one can get any product, and it rings true for Polaris right now. I know a lot of guys and girls who are trying to get machines, and it's just not working out because there's not machines. You know, there was a period where machines couldn't be made. So we're in a weird spot where people are traveling really far. Used machines are crazy expensive. I mean, I saw a 4-seat Turbo S for almost 40 grand, and someone bought it. It was just, you know, people are buying what they can buy right now, and it's just kind of is what it is. But I really hope that Polaris has kind of taken this time to reevaluate. I know I have some inside knowledge that there's kind of a shift happening at Polaris. There's a redirect in marketing. There's a redirect in the focus. Because I think that when the Pro XP flopped like it did, I mean, no one at Polaris expected it to fall flat like it did, because it fell really flat, it fell on deaf ears. And the Turbo S, like the actual release of that car was not this crazy monumental thing. The Turbo S was publicized by people going out and buying them and being like, hey, everybody, listen, these are the best cars they've ever made. The Turbo S got its, you know, fame and fortune from people buying it and being like, holy crap, Polaris, you nailed it. You guys got it right here. And Polaris, you know, is just now kind of hitting that, oh man, well, like this car is awesome. And they're really making a strong push for the Turbo S. I think they learned the lesson from the Turbo S, and I think that they have also learned a lesson Pro XP. And I think that we're going to see, something really cool this year. I know that the 2021 models for the 1000 XP have been released. Let's see if I can find you one here. Extreme Performance. It's kind of interesting. They've got the new colors up 2021. I'm not sure if they're not being shown here. I don't want your feedback, Polaris. Don't bother me. So the new colors are out for that car, but nothing else has been released yet. I know we're all kind of waiting on the edge of our seats. I think the expectation is that next month they should actually release all the information on that car. And as you know, if you were following the page last year, we got in all kinds of potential legal threats from Polaris and legal battles with people because we had images of the Pro XP 2 weeks before it came out, and we put them up. And we did not take those images. I need to explicitly say that I did not take those pictures. Those pictures were sent to us, and we posted them, and we got letters from Polaris and everyone else there. So what I can tell you is that it seems that Polaris will always, and I'm saying this with a tinfoil hat on just a little bit, but with some degree of talking to people, they'll leak stuff on purpose, and they'll do it what kind of the general feel is, and they'll just throw stuff out there, and they'll use random people just happen to throw something up and see what the response is. And I know that when we put the pictures up, we got into a discussion with some of the guys from Polaris, and they were really upset when the full pictures came out because well before the actual release, I mean, there were pictures of the body, pictures of the carnivores and the entire redoing of everything. But if you remember correctly, I don't think I could find it. Let's see if I can find it. Leaked Pro XP pictures. There were about 6 months before the Pro XP actually came to fruition, and it was this blue, like up on tires razor, but it had a new grill. It had a whole different stuff, and it looked like a mishmash of parts. And everyone was telling you, no, it's not it. It is it. But really, what it was is it was just they were trying different things here and there, and kind of piecing them together. Now, I think there it is, perfect. I can get you guys to see the same thing I'm seeing here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to share my entire screen so we can stop messing with this. All right, so it was this picture right here where this was the first time that we had seen new fascia that they had, or I don't remember the exact phrasing they used for it. I'm actually going to change this here because I go back to make sure you guys can see everything. All right. But that was also where we saw the new stock tires that were coming on the Turbo S car. We saw new cage designs, new seats. Obviously, the new suspension for the Turbo S was seen there, and none of us knew what it was. But this was a long time ago. But this is kind of the things that seem like Polaris leaks out on purpose to get a feel, and I know a feel for how things are going to be kind of taken in by everybody. I think that the response to this particular picture was very positive. And then you had the old RS1 pictures that you see here that were like crazy, kind of broke the internet type stuff because the RS1 was, kind of a rumored vehicle for a really long time. It's cool. The and stuff are cool, but I, kind of got that they leak stuff on purpose. And I had never really thought much about it other than that. There's a great picture of one. Once it kind of all came to fruition, it was just very, I don't know, it's very interesting to see how companies choose to do marketing. And I can tell you right now that Polaris themselves are going to be doing some very different things. And I would imagine that they're going to push this 72-inch Pro XB that we're all fantasizing about, or potentially a new engine. There's so much here. There's so much here that people have been waiting on. And I really think this is either going to be the year that Polaris levels the playing field or even surpasses Can-Am, because they really are very close. But it feels like the momentum is with Can-Am because Can-Am has had multiple back-to-back punches that have been releases that are excellent. And Polaris has had the Turbo S, which kind of fell flat. They didn't really push it, in my opinion. I didn't see much from Polaris about that car. And then you had the Pro XP, which, in my opinion, flopped pretty bad. One thing I think was cool that Can-Am released this week is 2021 Can-Am Defender, a little 6x6. How cool is that? I know a lot of these exist out there right now, but I'm thinking about what if you showed up, with a 6x6 UTV that was an X3. What if they made a 6x6 4-seat RZR, something like that? It would be a very interesting thing. I know that there's Super ATV, I think, built one that has like a recovery vehicle. But if you built a performance 6x6, it would kind of change the way that 6x6s are viewed. It would change how, kind of things are looked at in general. I think it'd be really neat. And I think that you could do a really cool, like, party bus type feel with a 6x6 high performance vehicle. So all that being said, I think that we're in a really unique time to be a UTV. I think we're in a really unique time to be in the sport, because Corona hits and you have these different things that people are interested in looking at, and they're really new things. New things are coming. I have a feeling that it's going to be a very, very interesting release. And even if you come in here and you type in Polaris RZR 21, you see that, which is a great car. But you have these leaked images of stuff coming through, and I don't know how many people remember this one, but this was from 2018, 2017, and very clearly here we see the Pro XP. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. That's night and day. That's the Pro XP that they were testing years ago. So, are we in for this? Are we in for the side engine, the new style of design here? I think so. I mean, I tell you what, I've gotten a lot of messages from people telling me, people who are in the know at Polaris, telling me, no, that's not going to happen. No, no, no. Why would you take a picture from 2015 and break it down like that? And it's like, well, you were telling me the same thing about, this picture. You were telling me the same thing about that picture. And you were telling me that those are, that's nothing. It was a demo vehicle from 5 years ago. Well, guess what? That's the new vehicle that came out, last year. So that picture right here, I would be very surprised if we don't see that in production. So it's a very, and for those listening just to the audio version, I was comparing the old gray and silver pictures of the Pro XP that are from 2017, 2018 to the picture of the RZR under the tarp that has the side mounted engine, it looks like, and the side mounted transmission. No, man, it's got Turbo S trailing arms and Pro XP length, sway bar links and all kinds of stuff. It's very interesting, and you got a very different setup on the front as well. It's just, there's so much that can come from this, and I really think that people kind of get duped when people come in and say, that's, oh, it's nothing. Someone from Polaris comes back and is like, oh, that's from 2015. Like, why would you trust that? Like, I've had people tell me that. They're like, yeah, these pictures are from like 2016. You think they're really going to have this information and just sit on it? If somebody tells me that, 9 times out of 10, I'm probably thinking, wow, this is some validity. Why did you feel the need to come out and tell me this is stupid when you know that, the podcast is a platform for information to go out? So obviously you're going to try and stifle the information. I got my tinfoil hat on a little bit here, folks, but they're going to try and stop the news from getting out. And obviously, even this picture from 2018, 2017 at the Pro XP, it's real now. So I would be surprised if it's not this year. It's got to be next. And let's talk about that. If Polaris doesn't push out this car, there we go. If Polaris doesn't push out the new enhanced car this year or next year, I might say that they're never going to. I mean, unless Can-Am really makes a decision that's poor, I would imagine that they just wouldn't be able to recover from that. So, very interesting thing. It's kind of just all up for discussion and grabs, and just what happens next. We're not really sure. Again, man, just look at that car. That is a beautiful car. Also, I don't know if anyone has kept up with the Pro XP tender spring they've been having. Looks like the new springs they're sending out are not even giving them the clearance that they're supposed to. It looks like it gave them 1/2 inch to 1 inch better, because the tender springs on all the vehicles are like completely collapsed. But Pro XP is supposed to not be that way. They've warrantied them and sent out new springs, and it's just not, they're junk again. So what are you going to do? But all that said and done, well done, Can-Am. You have a great piece of technology in the car now. We're super excited to see what you guys come up with next. Polaris, you've got till next month, and I hope and I'm praying that you guys have something crazy up your sleeve, and I can't wait to talk to you guys from Can-Am and Polaris. If you guys have anything you want me to ask them, make sure you go to our Facebook page or our Instagram, and you're following us there, and let me know right on the page's wall. Send us a message. Send us a message on Instagram or whatever. We've got a couple of really great interviews coming up with the manufacturer, so I'm really hopeful that everybody gets that. Everybody can get a question answered. Other than that, it's business as usual. I hope everyone has had a really, really good. It's been really great. I'm exhausted. It's 4 o'clock right now, my time. I got up like 6 hours ago, just barely alive, and glad to be here. I'm this weekend in a great place called Iron Gap. David Uptain, Razor Life, put a video up on YouTube, and he basically showed everything we did. It was amazing crawling if you're into that kind of thing. Kind of funny how you have to get there. It's a really long drive on pavement to get there, but see if I can show you guys some of the pictures of those obstacles. I'm sure you've seen them on. Social media and things like that, but it's a really great place to go ride. I really can't wait to go back. If you see, it's a lot of just really rough, rocky stuff. I'd love back in the fall when it's all, kind of clear and you can see and you got pretty stuff like that. So I'd love to go back, but I'll tell you this, man. We went riding with a couple guys, couple sets of tires that were really good. Super Grip performed really well. Broke a couple axles, I think. I know one broke for sure. But that video, I'll actually, in this episode of the podcast, I'll put a link to the video on our Facebook page. If you can go to the sections where you can watch me rock crawl, I'm having a noise come from my car. And if you can diagnose the noise or show me, that this is the problem or give me suggestions on how to, I personally think it's my transmission. You'll hear it when I'm going from reverse to low and back and forth a little bit. It's not the initial pinion grabbing, in the transmission sound, but it's a really high pitched squeal that happens right as I'm taking off after going a different direction. If you can diagnose that for me, like I said, that video's on YouTube. I'll post the link up here shortly. If you can diagnose the sound for me, I'll send you $100 card if you get it right. If you diagnose it, you get it right, you say, hey, I've done this before, I'll send you a gift card for saving me the trouble. And if it's not my transmission and I don't have to replace the transmission, sounds Happy Meal too. So I really appreciate some help diagnosing before I go pull the transmission and get up in there and try and figure it out for myself. That video is real cool. Ricky's a great guy. David's a good guy. They're a blast to hang out with. David is a guy who's full of character and is completely unholy himself and is unapologetic for being himself. So I like people like that. And Ricky's so nice. He give you the shirt off his back and really speaks to the companies that they represent. So great people to be around. Happy to always be around those guys and go riding with them. They love to ride. So without that, make sure you guys are following Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of fun stuff. If you're watching the YouTube videos, follow us there. Always a good time. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. It very much helps us. And who should we have on next? I've got a couple of guys in the works. I'm talking to Mitch Sr. from the Razor team, Razor factory drivers, talking to Phil Blurton. Obviously, we have the manufacturers coming up. So if there's anybody that you are dying to hear from, let us know. Without that, we're going to let everyone go. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, have had a great weekend. Stay safe and enjoy yourself. Bye, everybody.